Plugin of the week is the Radix Surfer EQ. The Radix Surfer EQ, or Radix actually is a company that makes some very uniquely designed and well thought out products. They come up with something that's sort of a niche area, something that's kind of missing a little pocket or zone that's kind of in between a lot of other stuff that really fits a lot of needs. So what is the Surfer EQ? The Surfer EQ actually has a pitch detection engine built into it. So you can use it as a normal EQ, and it actually has a very nice kind of cool transparent EQ, but you can also have it follow or track the pitch of the instrument that you're applying it to. And the cool part about this is you can actually get the EQ to follow the notes and track the gain along with the notes that are being played. And there are lots of really cool uses. So primarily for this EQ, it's designed for working with monophonic instruments. So musical-based instruments that are single pitch. So if you start getting into chords and all kinds of things like that, you're going to get inconsistent results, or maybe not the results that you want. So you could use it straight out as an EQ. What you have here is a high pass and low pass filter, and we have 5 bands in the middle. The middle band has a unique feature that built in a resonance engine, and I'll kind of show you what that's all about, so you can kind of add it on that end. You have a shelving EQ option on the low band and on the high frequency band. And then on the mid bands, you have all of the other stuff. So you have the normal boost and cut or gain controls on the bottom. You have a Q control here in the middle. And then you have the surfer section. Now, the surf section initially allows you to select a frequency. So if I actually sweep this around, you could see that it adjusts a particular frequency. If I ask it to surf, then it will kind of work based on the harmonic that I select. So I turn it on, it will kind of work with a first harmonic, and it'll kind of work anywhere in between. And so the idea is that it will detect the original pitch, but it won't just apply EQ that you set to that particular pitch. It will allow you to move it around to other places, which is really, really cool, because that opens up like a whole, in other words, to other harmonics, to later harmonics in series. So if you shift it to some higher tonal center as the pitch of, say, a vocal or a bass part kind of moves around, you can actually have it track the movement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a couple of examples here of how this can be used. And so we'll start by just taking this. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to take the, just kind of zoom in on the bass track right now for a second and focus on something that's a common problem when working with basses. And one is to get an EQ that kind of sounds right or fits into the mix. See, one of the problems with instruments that have moving fundamentals, unlike drums where, you know, for a kick drum or a snare drum, you could sort of focus the EQ and boost on the fundamental frequency of the shell of the drum. And if you find that fundamental frequency, you can get the most out of that low frequency boost and adjust the width to add body. So it's centered around the actual tone of the drum, and you're not picking up some kind of weird mid resonance or something like that, unless that's what you want. The cool part about that is that that pitch will generally stay the same throughout the song. It's not going to shift, okay, unless the drum detunes over the course of the song, you know. But that's not going to be the case in almost every situation. So that keeps everything very clean, and then you can kind of filter around it, focus around it, and it's good. But when you get to something like an instrument, like a bass or a guitar, a vocal, a flute, any kind of instrument that maybe plays either multiple notes or single notes, what ends up happening is that the fundamental frequencies now shift over a range based on the range of that instrument. So for a piano, that covers a broad range, you know, of frequencies, a very, very broad range of frequencies. When you get to a bass, it's a lesser range, but what it does is it sometimes prohibits you from focusing the EQ into a particular area, because if you dip at a particular frequency area too much, you may actually subtract out or lessen particular notes that the bass player plays. And so in an attempt to adjust the tone of the instrument, what you really end up doing is you end up taking away some aspects of the musical performance. Same thing if you boost. Now, this can actually come in handy if for whatever reason a particular note doesn't stand out as much as the others, and you can kind of focus in on that particular frequency and kind of zone in on it and kind of work with it that way. So this is not really the tool for that. There are plenty of EQs that actually give you piano keyboards that you can musically select a note and boost around it if that's the particular case. What this is doing is it's kind of following what note is actually being played. And I'm going to show you here on the bass why this is really, really cool. So let's just say that I start with a fundamental bass sound. And one thing that I might want to do here is I might want to boost in the low end, right? So I'm going to shift my frequency here. So I'm going to follow it here in an area around, pretty close to around the range where it's going to, now normally what I would do is I would do a shelf, you know, around that frequency to kind of capture the range of instruments so I could generally bring up the warmth of the bass. But instead what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do something different. I'm actually going to focus this to a narrower cue, and then I'm going to have it surf. So now as the bass plays, and of course now in this chorus section he's only playing a couple notes. So the EQ is tracking the movement, and now I can set the cue to set the basic warmth characteristic. So if I want it to be a little warmer, or if I want it to be a little more focused. So what it does now, instead of covering a broad range of frequencies for the tone, I can now focus it into a narrower area, and this will allow it to kind of work and track maybe a little bit better with the drums, in that it will be less clogging. It'll be focused in a way that you can only do with fixed pitch instruments. Another really cool thing that I can do in here, and let's just kind of listen to that in the context of the drums and the guitars. So if I bypass it, so it's really cool because now I can add that in. Now, here's another really cool thing that can be helpful in getting a bass to translate. And this is something that I always do in terms of getting a bass to translate when you go over to small speakers. Because one of the things that almost always happens is that if it's a very rich, low-frequency instrument, you know, bass that maybe it isn't as stringy or doesn't have a lot of, you know, mid-range frequency in it, or, you know, as you start to get into the upper harmonics, then what ends up happening is that it doesn't translate through smaller speakers. So you play it on something, you know, like, you know, through an iPhone or an iPad or, you know, some mobile media player that has a really small speaker, laptop, whatever, and the bass just disappears entirely. Now, you're never going to get those low frequencies. You can artificially create it to some degree, but you want the bass part to actually be heard, because if that just completely disappears in that lower range, or, you know, in those smaller speakers rather, then you end up with problems. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up another band, do a little surf here, and I'll show where it is here. I'm going to do a narrow cue again, but I'm going to move it here into a range where I think it focuses a little bit more, and that's going to be somewhere in that like 600, 700, 800 range. I'm just going to kind of center it somewhere in there. I'll just kind of put it in there, I don't know, like around 800 or so, and then have it track that movement. So now I can add this in. So it's kind of, so you see here it tracks perfectly with the lower boost. And if I wanted to here, I could also surf, and this is kind of a little bit, I could set a dip here on this, and I'll also kind of set a narrow EQ here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of put it somewhere in between, do a broader EQ, do just a tiny amount here so that this kind of scales around with it as well. And if I want to warm it up, I can widen that Q on the low end. And let's hear that in the mix. What it does is it, in a subtle way, allows me to form fit the bass tone that actually allows it to kind of scale and kind of move throughout the song. So it's a form of a dynamic EQ, but most dynamic EQs are sort of built like compressors. So the thing about a static EQ is that it will give you a sound regardless of what's coming in. So it's not intelligently responding in any way, shape, or form to the existing audio material. It's like shelf at 10K, that's what you get. And it's just regardless of what you put into it, that's what you get. So it's really static. And that works for a lot of things, you know, especially for filters and stuff like that, and where you're just trying to get an overall sheen or shine or something. Dynamic EQs are great for solving problems. Maybe it allows you to kind of pump the low end of your kick drum, or it, you know, so you could kind of hone into a frequency there, or maybe it allows you to de-ess a vocal very accurately, so it dips out only when those S's occur. And you can focus things within particular frequency ranges, but they only move up and down in gain. What's happening here is that you essentially have a fixed gain, but the frequency is shifting, and it's kind of moving along with that. So it's a lateral movement that works with frequencies and harmonics as you kind of go along. And the detection engine, as you can see, is pretty quick. You know, it works really pretty rapidly. So this is a really cool solution, especially for things like this. And we can also use this type of thing on a variety of instruments. I'm not going to be able to demonstrate all the things it can do, but here's some a cool thing here. So if I kind of go on here and let's open up a vocal track and kind of work with this in the context of a mix here. Let's just see what we got.
Do you know how many people own your car?
So similarly,
Every time I see it, I wonder where you are.
So similarly, what I can do is if I want to bring in a little bit of body into the voice, I can actually start bring in a surf EQ, find something that's going to center fundamentally around the area where she's singing.
Do you know how many people own your car?
And I'll exaggerate it here.
Every time I see it, I wonder where you are. The things that made me laugh now, they make me cry. I miss the way I felt looking in your eyes. So I keep looking around with.
So it looks like we're down an octave from where she's singing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to swing this up here. So I'm going to swing it up here so I could see where that harmonic. Let's see if
Do
that...
you know how many people own your car?
Or that's actually the first harmonic. It depends how, like, sometimes that is actually
Every time I see it,
considered
I
the
wonder
note.
where you are. The things that made me laugh, now they make me cry.
So here I can create a nice little focus in on
I miss the
that.
way I felt looking in your eyes.
And then if I want, I can also have like an air frequency up here. So I can shift something up higher, work, you know, on a shelf way up at the top over here and have this kind of track.
Do you know how many people own your car? Every time I see it, I wonder where you are. The things that made me laugh, now they make me cry.
This also works with filters, so I can actually have a low-pass filter, a tight low-pass filter on the bottom, bring that in, and then tighten that up right underneath where she's singing there. Oops, let me just kind of sweep that back a little bit. You can see it's a little bit of a broader range kind of filter. Let's just see. Yeah, okay, that's very broad, so we could keep it general.
Do you know how many people own your car? Every time I see it, I wonder where you are. The things that made me laugh, now they make me cry. I miss the way I felt looking in your eyes.
So then, and I think that kind of is a little bit too, maybe it's, I need to pull it up a little bit higher, lower.
Own your car? Every time I see it, I wonder where you are.
And what's really cool about this is I never end up in a muddy range or a boxy range in the vocal, because it will follow that fundamental frequency and shift around with it. So if I listen to this, which may sound subtle here in the context of the track.
How many people own your car? Every time I see it, I wonder where you are. The things that made me laugh, now they make me cry. I miss the way I felt looking in your eyes. So I keep looking around with my eyes on the ground, trying to find the confidence I know I've dropped. I keep retracing my steps, going through the events, trying to find out when my love stopped. And just like an assassin in the heat of the moment, got my hand on the trigger.
So here, again, like I can take this up and shift it over to these background vocal parts just to kind of show you here. So we have some harmony parts. I can actually, I'll take this off on the top end, maybe warm them up a little bit and have a little high pass filter here on the top and crank that way up so it has a little bit of a warming effect, and have like a similar type of thing where now it's focusing a little bit those background vocal parts. So as they come in, then that creates a...
Assassin in the heat of the moment, got my hand on the trigger. I'm ready to pull, watching your every move, every step, everything that you do. Killing any piece of me I left in you.
So let's listen to that section again. You can really hear how it focuses so much more and makes more intelligible what it is that you're listening to.
In the heat of the moment, got my hand on the trigger. I'm ready to pull, watching your every move, every step, everything that you do. Killing any piece of me I left in you. 'Cause I'm heartache's assassin.
So you got a good idea of like some of the capabilities on that end. Now, there's also some really crazy stuff that you can kind of do with it. So I rather than kind of recreate it, what I did was I kind of paired together some filters with some dramatic boosts and cuts. And now what happens is if I can set a focus here, I can actually start to create some more unique sounding effects where I have filtering that's following the frequency of the vocal.
Do you know how many people own your car? Every time I see it, I wonder where you are. The things that made me laugh now they make me cry.
And whether it's perfectly suited for the song, I think you can get a quick idea of like how you can start to play with this and get some really crazy effects. Not only that, there's also this resonance engine here, which can sort of make it even crazier than that.
Do you know how many people own your car?
And then now the cue control changes
Every time I see it, I wonder where you are.
change the resonant
The
characteristics.
things that made me laugh now they make me cry. I miss the way I felt looking in your eyes.
And so there, when you got that shifting kind of movement, then you get all these phasey artifacts, and you start to get into more of like a filter that's responding to an envelope. But when it responds to the envelope, it's responding to the actual envelope, not the pitch, and that makes this really a unique tool. It's something that it's not a solution in every scenario, but for things like this where you're looking for something that just does a simple kind of focus and allows you, particularly in any kind of mix where you have a lot of dense instrumentation, you can actually bring out the detail and focus in on some of the individual notes or aspects of those individual instruments. Allow yourself to kind of boost within a narrower range and allow the EQ to kind of track the movement of that. It can also be triggered by MIDI. So there's all kinds of parameters that you can open up here to change the tracking. You can set a limit on the high pass filter so that in the case where the vocal goes up high, it doesn't thin out the vocal too much. So you can sort of cushion it so that that hits a wall on that side. You can change the noise floor and tracking sensitivity. So if you feel like it's not tracking the pitch accurately enough, you can have some parameters that can help you adjust there. If you feed a MIDI signal into it, you can have it override the detection. So maybe you can basically like bypassing the surfer mechanism for a particular note or a particular section. So you can program that in. You can actually have it surf by note. So you can actually have the MIDI signal come in or work in instrument mode. So in other words, you can actually use the keyboard or MIDI programming interactively to feed into the surfer EQ to get it to do some of the things that you want it to do and kind of create some unique effects. This is one that has, within the simple layout here, has a lot of really, really unique possibilities when you start to match up all the filters. And then all I've really spoken about here is just the straight surfer EQ, but you can actually do just a normal EQ. So within any of those things, you can have fixed frequency boosts and cuts that stay within those particular ranges. There are sometimes reasons where you want to just have like a normal static EQ, and you can have it do that as well while having an element that's sort of surfing around and following things. Very, 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 very cool. I really, really dig this one and love the Sound Radix company because they create plugins that are really unique, that kind of fill in these very unique roles that are very effective. The surfer EQ is one. I also did another video on the drum leveler. It also has some phase alignment tools. They got some really cool stuff, and it's a company worth checking out. So that's a plugin of the week. It's the Surfer EQ by Sound Radix.